What's up, everyone? So let's get into what I'm going to call the wow factor. And today that is weaponizing our words. To weaponize is a verb. Weaponize, weaponizing, transitive verb, to adapt or use as a weapon of war. That's from Webster's. And also we have weaponize, weaponized, weaponizing. To use something in order to deliberately inflict harm on people is to weaponize it. If you start pelting your brother with grapes, he might accuse you of weaponizing your fruit salad. When a group or government weaponizes something, they take an ordinary object and turn it into a weapon. This word was originally used during the Cold War as military jargon. When the U.S. Army added nuclear capabilities to rockets, preparing them for launching, they weaponized them. These days, it's common to describe everything from words to the internet as being weaponized. In fact, you can weaponize anything that can be used to attack someone. I'm going to give you a couple examples. Once upon a time, a woman that I was seeing lived across town. And so we didn't get to see each other that often. And the weekend came around and I invited her to come over. She was a student, so she had told me that she had some things going on. She needed to do some homework, things like that. I said, hey, no problem. If you can make it, that would be great. And I even went as far as to say, you're welcome to bring your computer if you want to do some homework here. And then when you have like the free time, you're already here. So then we could watch a movie, go out to eat, what have you. So she did that. That was on maybe a Saturday. The following Wednesday, Tuesday, Wednesday, something along that time frame, she was a bit frustrated because she was behind on some of the things that she needed to do, and her schoolwork was one of them. And at that time, she casually had announced that, well, I'd have gotten more done if you hadn't manipulated me into coming over. And I immediately took that as red flag, red flag, what is going on? And I, said, no, I didn't manipulate you. I said, if I'm being accurate here, that's not what manipulate means. So while we're at it, definition of manipulation.
Here's the definition of manipulation: the action of manipulating something in a skillful manner.
Okay, so I took manipulation as the action. Okay, here's the second: the action of manipulating someone in a clever or unscrupulous way. So that's what I had said, essentially. I said, as I know manipulate to be, we're talking about a planned sequence of events to intentionally get you to do something. That's not necessarily what I was doing. I invited you of your own free will. There was no coercion or anything else. So that was one of those incidents where I found a word to be weaponized against me. I don't think that she realized what she was doing or saying at the time. And I mean, we're not dating anymore, so it's kind of a non issue, but it's always one of those good examples that I like to use. And when I tell people that particular story, they're like, you're kidding. They're, wow, weaponizing our words. The acronym fits. So, a second example, my neighbor. And just recently, this has happened. And there's a video, Dogma Speaks. And what this is with my neighbor to just set the table. For the better part of a year and a half now, her dogs have barked quite freely in her backyard, and her backyard is right up against mine. So when I'm trying to sleep during the day, because I work at night, then that's a problem. And even on the weekends, it's really hard to enjoy just being in your backyard or being someplace, out, because those dogs are just constantly barking. So I thought on it. I talked to some good friends. What should I do? How should I approach this? And finally, one night, those dogs had just been barking. And when I say barking, I looked up the laws, nuisance laws, dogs barking constantly for hours. I actually felt bad for the dogs because they had been barking for so long. And I felt like they were under some sort of duress from their owner not being home. This is when the dogs bark. So I was going to leave her a note. And just as I was leaving the note, I saw her pull up. So I went outside and she was pulling in, and I respectfully stood about 20 feet away from the front of her car. Now, it was a little dark and I was off to the side, but even before I approached her, I said, "Good evening." And she was startled. "Oh, you scared me." Then I approached, had our conversation, but during the conversation, because she was upset about what I was asking her to do as far as correcting her dogs, she then used the word that I attacked her. "You came out and attacked me." I said, "Ma'am, I did not attack you. I said I stood respectfully at a distance and I addressed you from that point on." Now, why is there importance to understanding what weaponizing words is? Because these are things that can set a particular tone. Now, in the first incident, this is somebody who was frustrated because they hadn't taken care of their own things. And so she was behind on her schoolwork. And the easy thing to do was to point it out at somebody else. "Well, you manipulated me. This is why I'm behind on my schoolwork." Not the case. But that's where you have to be able to recognize what weaponizing is and understand having a larger vocabulary can definitely help, because people will take particular words and use them that you may not be too familiar with, and therefore you may be taking on something that you didn't need to. Whereas I think she may have been looking for an apology. "Oh, I'm sorry I invited." Well, I'm not really sorry that I invited you. I'm sorry that you're behind on your work, but that's still not for me to be sorry for necessarily. In the case of my neighbor, what she wanted me to do was to be able to back away. "Hey, whoa, whoa, I'm not attacking you." Scurry back into my house, and therefore the conversation didn't need to be had because she was caught off guard by the conversation being brought to her at a time she was just getting home. I didn't have a particular time in which to say, "This is when I'm going to plan to speak to her." But that's how it turned out. And those dogs haven't barked since because I stood my ground and I was able to recognize when words were being weaponized against me. So, again, it's important um, because you want to be able to disarm somebody with aggressive language when it presents itself. You don't want to allow somebody to continue to fashion words and sharpen them to use them against you. It's not a place that you want to be in that sort of conversation, because it's going to have it may put you on a defensive, and what you need to do is to be able to meet that and say, "No, that's not what that means. This is what I mean, and this is what that means." So I was able to really put a definition to manipulation and attack in those contexts and say, "This is not what that is, and I'm not going to accept those words from you. So you can recount what you would like to say, but those words will not work." Think of weapons in language the same way we might consider something like somebody attacking you with a knife or just with their hands or something. You want the ability to recognize something that's approaching you in the form of an attack and be able to defend yourself. And that would be critical in physical presence. Now, the same thing can be said for defending yourself against words, because words, as we know, can have a much more damaging and long-term effect than physical wounds. So we really want to be able to say, like, the same way that you would be able to, defend yourself or use your pepper spray or whatever, but you wouldn't just pepper spray a stranger who was just walking by you. You would wait to see that person coming at you or saying, "Hey, give me that," or what have you. So you want to be able to use it, but use it accurately and with good timing. So those are just a couple things that I would say when it comes to weaponizing words recognizing them and being able to disarm. The same way you see in self-defense videos, you grab something and you twist their wrist and the knife falls out. I'm not saying do those things as far as those videos, whole different story, but you know what I mean. You want to be able to disarm people, and that way when you stop them in their tracks and say, no, that's not what that means, and that I won't accept that, let them change their tone rather than you change to them. Um, so it can come in a few ways, and deciphering, weaponizing words. One, I would ask, what is their tone? Is it a tone that sounds aggressive? Is it sarcastic? Is it something disingenuous? What's their tone? Because a lot of times tone will set the tone, and you'll know exactly, well, I can't say with certainty, but you'll have a good idea that this is somebody who's being a little aggressive, and weaponizing words potentially. And sometimes they can come very calmly. So um, you want to maybe look, are they accenting or stressing particular words? Because that's where you can see where they potentially are trying to get a message across. And sometimes a tone or an accent or a stressing of words don't necessarily have to come with a biting edge to it. It doesn't have to come with a whole lot to it. It can be very casual, and people that are good at it can just slip it in there. Much the way with the manipulation example, she just casually said, "Well, you did manipulate me into coming over." It wasn't anything. Whereas my neighbor said, "You're attacking me," and she was really, emphatic about that. So you really do need to be able to read those and see what they are, and uh, it comes with time. I think it comes with just understanding that this is a potential thing. But we have other points, body language being another one of them. Is it potentially something that's going along with eye rolling, furrowing the brow? Are they talking, emphatically with their hands, demonstratively? How's their posture? Is it aggressive? Are they leaning in? Are they, talking like this? Because I see a lot of times people are doing that. So, what is their body language? What is their physical energy saying as well about what message they're conveying? Because sometimes the weaponizing will go along with it with an intimidation tactic, such as getting up in your face, getting closer to you, pointing. Any of those things can have those sort of effects. So, we want to watch for body language as well. Um, were there preceding events? Was there something that was already brewing between you and said person or persons? Was there a history of differing views? So, reading a history will definitely help you in the present and hopefully dispel anything that can happen in the future. But was there something that led up to it? Were there preceding events? I think that's another important piece to look at when somebody may be using weaponized words to try to dominate you in conversation. Um, I will go back with tone and accent and just say volume too. If somebody is just yelling, sometimes that can be a really big piece of that puzzle. And sometimes if they're just talking at a very low tone, that's also it can be an indicator as well that it's not that they're calm. It's just that might be their way of expressing real aggression before boom, before things pop. So you really want to be able to watch those. Reading the room. Now, if you don't have a history with somebody, and there's a topic at hand where the tensions may run high, such as like a town hall meeting or some sort of social setting where people are talking politics, people are talking religion, things like that. People will get very defensive and very quick to those weaponizing words, if that's the case, because if they feel like their demographic or their beliefs are under some sort of attack, that's a quick way to hear people weaponizing words. So a big part of that is understanding your emotional intelligence to not get so triggered, as they say, into just going into attacking people with words. But a lot of times people don't realize that this is where they're immediately going. And sometimes that's just the end result. So we want to make sure that we're reading a room at the same time, because what you also don't want to do is weaponize words back when you might be able to, again, disarm somebody, not by way of over talking or being smarter, but just by bringing the levels down. Again, my neighbor with the dog, I did tell her, I said, "Man, I'm going to need you to bring the tone down. I'm not yelling, so you can bring your tone down as well. We can have a respectful adult conversation." There's a lot of ways to extinguish what somebody's doing. So if they're weaponizing words and you see that bomb going off, it's kind of like those old movies where the guy has to clip the wires in time, clip those wires so the bomb doesn't go off, and really give them, a chance to kind of walk back on what it is that they were doing. And maybe they'll calm down and you can have a peaceful conversation, or at least an agree to disagree sort of moment. Um, the good old rumor mill. I like the rumor mill as one of these pieces, because a lot of times what will happen is, if you are having any sort of discussion, disagreement, and this is spilled out, what can happen is you will find that this person will talk to who they feel is their circle, their confidants, and they will really speak freely in those weaponized words. And then you can find out, because a lot of times, as we know, information travels. It doesn't mean you have to fall in for it. Doesn't mean you should believe everything that you've heard either. But if you've already had a run-in, you've seen some body language, you have a history, and then these sources may be credible to you, it does give you some sort of leverage to feel that you are onto something. Now, that will be my third example. I do have some episodes at work where I've dealt with people and had some unpleasant dealings with them, and one, read their tone, had a history with them, seen the body language, and then when the rumor mill came around, it was from somebody who I would believe to be a credible source, and therefore I was able to formulate a larger idea of what I was facing and how to deal with this situation. So you do have a lot of options when it comes down to that. Now, again, let's run those down. We're talking about weaponized words. To weaponize is to use something in order to deliberately inflict harm on people, is to weaponize it. So understand, I've said in a lot of cases, people may not understand that they're doing it. And I guess according to the definition, they are deliberately. So they have selected said words. And I wouldn't go against this either, but I think sometimes people, it's kind of like bumping into somebody on accident as opposed to just running into them on purpose. A lot of times I think some people don't realize the power of words. And so while they may have been meaning to get a point across, they may not have meant to do it in the fashion that they did. And we do know that there are other people that just straight out weaponize words when it comes to politics, religion, other topics like that. So we do have something to be said about recognizing, again, the tone, the temperature, reading the room. Do you have a history, body language? And if you want to use the extra as the rumor mill, that's fine too. Or maybe not the rumor mill, but a credible source. So what are your thoughts? Do you have any experiences, ace up the sleeve, advice, comment, experience? What are your thoughts on the use of weaponized words? Have you used weaponized words? Have you done that before? And a lot of times it may not be that you've done it to attack somebody. Sometimes it might be a preemptive strike. Have you actually used words and weaponized them in order to get somebody off of you because you know them? You know this is where this is headed. So have you used words to weaponize in that sense? Have you used them to defend yourself, or do you just not adhere to the policy at all? Because again, it's deliberately to inflict harm upon people. So I know we really want to try to agree or disagree in a peaceful manner, but I think sometimes just enough words. It's if somebody's poking you with the stick, do you poke them back a little bit, or do you use other words that are more disarming? What's your tactic on effective communication? Because listening, looking, and stopping to think before you act are all vital pieces to this puzzle. So I'm going to leave it at that. Hopefully, this is something that you guys enjoy, and I hope that this finds everybody in their place, pursuit, or beginnings of total health, mind, body, and soul. And we'll see you guys on the next one. Oh, and by the way, please like the channel, even if you dislike it. That engagement helps the channel all the way around. So the comments are great, but we need those likes. We need the dislikes. Either one. The comments are great. Again, notifications, subscriptions, and all that stuff, it all helps. So we are grateful for your presence, watching, and again, we'll see you soon. Peace, love, unity, solidarity.